Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy. For SEC Media Days is off and running. LSU took turn first there in the Omni in downtown Dallas. Right now, the Ole Miss Rebels are taking their turn. Lane Kiffin in the big room. But Brian Kelly had that opportunity earlier today, and I want to get to some of the things that he had to say to the assembled media there in Dallas. And the first question that Brian Kelly got, and I know he got this question multiple times, it's not surprising, was about year three, because year three, his last two stops at Cincinnati and Notre Dame were really, really quality football teams. Cincinnati made a BCS Bowl, and Notre Dame played for a national championship in year three. And the question was asked, like, why, Brian Kelly, in year three have your teams had the success they've had?
Year three is a level of accountability in every program that I've taken over that is heightened. There's a trust factor and an accountability level within our process that kind of, I would say, pops, if you will. And that's this year. So this will be the most accountable football team that we've had at LSU. This will be a team that trusts each other at its highest level. And that has historically led to on-field success.
Now, when you hear that, the listener, I'm assuming you have the same reaction I do. And it's like, okay, I get it, but there was no transfer portal when you were at Cincinnati. There was no transfer portal at Notre Dame. You might have a couple of guys transfer out as just basic attrition, but this is a far bigger deal where you've got people coming and going all the time. Like, how can you suggest that the entirety of the program is bought in when there's so much turnover? And that question was immediately asked as a follow-up, like, does the transfer portal impact that quote-unquote buy-in and all that accountability that comes with year three?
You have to take that into consideration when you're bringing players into your program. So understanding who you're bringing in and what the expectations are of them. So, you know, when you have built that standard and that accountability, you can't just start throwing guys in there and not having them understand the same level. So you may have to pass on some guys if they don't meet. Look, there's two things that have to happen having said that. One, they have to have the skill to play at LSU, but they got to fit the culture. And sometimes both of those don't work in that situation.
You know, Brett Bielema didn't have a Hall of Fame-worthy career at Arkansas. I think we would all agree on that. But he did have a quote in this exact setting, SEC Media Days, that has always stuck with me because I found it interesting. And I think he believes it, and I think a lot of coaches try this, but it's a different thing altogether to make it happen. Brett Bielema's quote was, "You recruit your own problems." And Brian Kelly talks about you've got to have guys that fit the culture. You've got to have guys that can play at LSU, but they've got to buy in. And I think you can. I'm not going to name any names. I think you can pretty quickly point to two guys who transferred in last year, who were either very, very highly recruited or had success elsewhere, and did not fit in at LSU. Maybe it was because they couldn't play to the level. Maybe it was because they didn't fit the culture, but it didn't work. Now they took them, and you pay that price because they don't play, they don't help you, and obviously you've got some issues on that side of the ball. But I'm curious if Brian Kelly's approach changed after taking those two guys. And I guess we'll just have to see what this team looks like, how they perform, and what the culture is around the program, whether or not Brian Kelly has got a group of guys around him that are fully bought in. Now, that's one topic of conversation here for Brian Kelly. Another that has come up a bunch and that we'll all talk about, incessantly in August. LSU lost Mississippi State in the opener, then they lost to UCLA in the opener, then they lost to Florida State in the opener, then they lost to Florida State again in the opener, and now you're going on year 5 of trying to lose 5 straight openers. And can you do anything differently to ramp this thing up to make sure your team is ready to play in that first game? And Brian Kelly spoke to that.
I think openers give you a glimpse of who you are more than we're not preparing the right way. I've been preparing football teams for over 30 years, and I don't know that we'll have a major shift in our preparation as much as knowing who we are going into year 3 and knowing what our strengths and weaknesses. I think we go into this game knowing a lot better about who we are, LSU, both on offense and defense.
And that's fair, because if you go back to the first game he coached at LSU, which was against Florida State, they had no idea who they were. He told the broadcast team that Friday, prior to the Sunday kickoff, that Jaden Daniels would be the starting quarterback. Now, I think he knew that prior to that, but the team may not have known until pretty close to the opener who their quarterback was. After that game, they made wholesale changes to the offensive line and the special teams units. They were nowhere near the same team when they took the field against Alabama in Tiger Stadium that they were in that game in the Superdome. They did not know who they were. And then this past year, I think he probably had some concerns on defense. Those of us who just went out to fall camp and watched these guys play had some concerns about the defense, but I think they got exacerbated when you looked at that Florida State game. Hopefully, you've got a better feel for who you are, what players are in your program, and what you need to do to get ready to beat Southern Cal in Vegas. And I guess the biggest issue there is not taking over for the Heisman Trophy winner or the 2 first-round draft picks on offense. It is the defense. So what's the biggest progression on this defense since the spring under Blake Baker?
Scheme aside, I think everybody has, their flavor of what the scheme, looks like. And Blake certainly has an established comfort level in a particular scheme. But it's relationships. It's getting players excited about stepping on the field. It's about players truly wanting to be part of those 11 guys, running, hitting, being part of that unit. And Blake's ability to orchestrate that, to bring that together, is what's been the piece that is really evident.
We have gotten to the point with Brian Kelly's LSU program that we don't have to talk about the Texas Bowl 3 years ago anymore. We all know that there were 35 guys out there and that a wide receiver was playing quarterback, and that was a relevant talking point to Brian Kelly's early tenure here at LSU. We don't have to talk about that anymore. And we know that the team that he had in his first year was kind of a makeshift team out of transfer portal guys, and we know that there are still some concerns on the roster this past year as far as depth goes, and we still may have some questions as far as the talent level on the interior defensive line and maybe some of the other places on the roster. But they've got their full complement of scholarship players, and there's not a position where they just don't have any guys. So Brian Kelly kind of spoke to that and suggested this is the deepest team he's had at LSU.
This will be the deepest team that we've had. So I don't know what that's going to be relative to the expectations. All I can do is continue to work towards what our process is, and then whatever those outcomes are going to be evaluated externally. And I don't control those. I control what our process is and how we go to work every day. And I can tell you, in year 3, I've had really good success with getting our football team to be the most accountable, the most trusting team that I've had here at LSU. And that's usually been pretty good at my other stops.
He's good at this. He's going to do a good job in front of the cameras. He'll do a good job on the ESPN and SEC Network desks. He'll do a good job with the local media. He's good at this type of stuff. He's been around long enough. He's got a good enough personality. He presents himself well in this setting. So for me, it's not necessarily learning anything completely eye-opening or getting that great soundbite from him. It's optimism season, and that's the picture that he's painting. I will tell you, of all that I heard from Brian Kelly, and I haven't heard everything he said, Matt will have more on that coming up in 50 minutes from Dallas, where he's probably followed Brian Kelly around all day. I can only do so much back here in Baton Rouge. He did say one thing that I kind of opened my ear a little bit and furrowed my brow and went, okay, that's something. Nick Saban asked him about somebody or something that maybe surprised you a little bit about your team. And he came out and said, basically, I don't like giving labels to young players early on. I feel like it unfairly sets expectations. He mentioned Kyle Hamilton at Notre Dame, who they thought was a really, really good player, and he kind of tamped that down, and then he went out and had a monster opener, and the rest was history, and he was a first-round pick to the Ravens. But he doesn't want to necessarily anoint guys early on. But he mentioned 3 names. 3 names from this signing class that's on campus now. And it interested me. He mentioned Dominick McKinley, 5-star defensive lineman, Acadiana. There's some playing time to be had and potentially a talent grade that needs to take place at defensive tackle. He mentioned Gabe Reliford. Same thing. 4-star Louisiana defensive line. Okay. And he mentioned Jelani Watkins as probably the fastest player on the team. We kind of knew that based on his track times over in Texas. But if you're looking at the freshman class, this was not tell me about Dom McKinley. It wasn't tell me about Gabe Reliford. It wasn't tell me about Jelani Watkins. He brought those 3 guys up with an open-ended question of what's kind of surprised you? And I thought, okay. And look, I don't want to sit here and bank on 2 freshmen jumping into the Southeastern Conference on the defensive front and playing 80% of the snaps. I don't want to bank on that. But maybe they're better than we thought. Maybe they're more college ready than most are. That's my one hope about these 2 guys specifically, McKinley and Reliford, is that college freshmen are the most prepared to play college football they've ever been, based on nutrition, strength programs, coaching, camps, early enrollees, all that kind of stuff has expedited the learning curve. Guys are redshirting in the mid-90s. Guys weren't playing much in the late 20-teens. Now they're kind of ready. And we'll see if those guys are. Brian Kelly alluded to that, and I thought that was an interesting thing from today. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.